evening. Welcome to AlphaPrep. I'm Josh, and I'm going to teach you how to populate your organizer so you can most efficiently own the SAT. To start, let's assume that you're working on a particular problem in the College Board Big Blue Book. Now, let's assume that you're on pages 720 and 721, and it happens to be that you are working on this particular problem, number 14, in the bottom left-hand corner. As you start to do this problem, your goal is to find the error in the sentence. As you walk through it, you may gravitate toward B, because really it just doesn't sound good. Because they painted scenes of life as ordinary people lived it, rather than scenes from myths, many 19th century American artists differed from earlier times. Sounds like a pretty decent sentence. As you gravitate toward B and you think that might be an error, if you look at it closely and think, what grammatically is right or wrong about this particular type of question? You might say, well, it technically grammatically is correct because it refers to life. Because they painted scenes of life as ordinary people lived it. So that works. So then you might gravitate toward E. In this case, the answer is not B and the answer is not E. So you've got to figure out what you're going to do. So because we know that the answer is definitely not B and it's not E, this is a type of problem you're going to need some help with. What you can do in that case is go straight to our website and in the College Board Big Blue Book, type in page 720 and then choose from the problems on that page. We're going to choose number 14. Immediately, our website gives you a list of similar questions in the Big Blue Book. It lets you know that it's a writing grammar question, that it's an identifying sentence errors type of question, and that it happens to be a comparison question in particular. We also know that it's easy. If it's an easy level question and you get it wrong, chances are you're going to need to learn how to do the easy level question, but you're also going to need to learn how to do the medium ones and the hard ones eventually. This being the case, you can click View All. When you do that, you see a list of every question in the College Board Big Blue Book of this exact same category, subcategory, and second subcategory. I'm simply going to add them all to my organizer. Now, what's nice about adding these to your organizer is that when you go to your organizer, you'll notice that the organizer happens to be in order of how frequently every category appears on every test. And you can read this blurb up top. For right now, let me show you. When I go into writing grammar, I'll notice that of my list of particular weaknesses, topics that I need to study, flow, which is coordination and subordination, is at the top of the list. That means it's my biggest priority in this moment because of all of these question types, it appears most on every SAT. Past, present, future questions appear second most of my particular list. Now, comparison questions are all the way down here. All that means is that they are an important question for me, and definitely more important than doing and receiving pronouns, shift to pronoun, redundancy, ha, more, most, or est, all of that. But at the same time, it's not as big a window to change my score as all of these other categories. Given that this is the one question that we're talking about now, I am going to go ahead and expand that list. I have a list of all of the questions in the Blue Book of that type, and as I start to work through them, I know that I can click and see what the answers are and go from there. If you're afraid you're going to cheat, you can always say, I'm only going to do the easy ones to start, click and see, and then click back and move on to the medium or the hard ones. The reason that we want to give you a list of every question in the College Board Big Blue Book of this type is twofold. Fold number one. This book has 10 full-length practice tests that are all made from the exact same database as the actual SAT you will be taking. That being the case, if you know how to do every question in this book, the general idea is that 4 out of every 5 questions you see on test day, you're going to feel very familiar with. You're going to look at it and say, oh, it's one of those types of questions. The second reason is because if you're in a class and you get a question wrong, and someone walks you through how to get it right, in that moment, you might feel great about that type of problem, but a week and a half later, a month later, you may see that problem on a test and literally remember talking about it, but have it on the tip of your tongue, and you might not feel so great about it. So if you were forced to do all of the easy questions, then all of the medium questions, and then all of the hard questions of that type, that would make a huge difference. Now, as you start to go through this list, there are a couple things to consider. First, if you got a question wrong and it was an easy level, how are you expected to be able to do all the questions on this list? We've made that easy for you. we have made strategy guides for every type of question. So if you have comparison question issues, you can go to this strategy guide. And while it may seem a bit overwhelming to see the whole guide at first, we've made it very convenient for you to zero in on one part of the guide and have that be your initial cheat sheet start. This is a simple list of examples of incorrect and correct problems of this type. So if you look at this, many modern rappers differ from the 1980s. We know exactly what we're trying to say and what they're comparing. However, technically, grammatically, you cannot compare the rappers to the 80s. You have to say many modern rappers differ from those of the 1980s, or many modern rappers differ from rappers of the 1980s. As you walk through this list, you become more and more familiar with this type of question. You recognize that you say the pizza at Pepe's in New Haven is better than Fairfield. You can't compare the pizza at Pepe's in New Haven to all of Fairfield. Instead, you need to compare it to the pizza at Pepe's in Fairfield. This particular question at the bottom is the most important one on this list right now because it was made using page 720, number 14, our original problem that we got wrong, as a guide to make it. Let's learn from it. Because they play sports with different rules, contemporary athletes differ greatly from earlier times. We can't compare the athletes to the times. We have to say because they play sports with different rules, contemporary athletes differ greatly from athletes in earlier times, or from those of earlier times. Either way, when we go back to this question, we recognize that many 19th century American artists differ from artists of earlier times. The answer is D, because you cannot compare the artists to the times. Once you have this, you can start walking through your study list, and as you get questions right on your study list, you can check them off. A lot of people become extremely addicted to this process, and the reason for that is because at a certain point, once you really feel like you've done everything you can do and you've gotten everyone right you can get right, you can click Remove All Mastered, and boom, your list becomes shorter. That way, the next time you sit down with an AlphaPrep tutor, you can zero in on exactly the types of problems that you still need help with. You would have gained a depth of subconscious learning as you were doing the entire list to begin with, and you would definitely have that type of exposure feel. I've seen this type of problem over and over again. That way, when you go over this type of problem, and you go over the ones that are left on your list, you have that moment where you say, oh, I totally get it. It's exactly like all the other ones I did, just ask me in a little different, weird, funky way, and typically the lesson really sticks. That's one way to populate your organizer. Another way to populate your organizer, which is really, really important, is to take our mini diagnostic tests. These represent essentially a medium-level question of every different type of question that appears on every SAT. As you walk through one of these tests, you easily can skip it if you just don't know how to do the question. You can easily guess if you think that you have an answer, and you can use some kind of logic to say, oh, they're talking about miles per hour, but it can't be a negative answer. Regardless of how you do it, once you finish taking one of these tests, you come to a page that gives you a breakdown of everything that you got right, wrong, or omitted. If you get a question right, it's in green. If you don't get a question right, your answer is in red, red like wrong, and the correct answer is in black. Now, as you walk through them, you have an opportunity to look at these types of questions and say, all right, I'm going to look at this question and try to figure out, what to do and what I did wrong and how I can get it right. And you can always see the explanation. And when you walk through the explanation, it helps you decide whether or not it's the type of problem that you just had that momentary mini brain fart and you really don't need to add it to your study list and you don't need to do a whole list of them, or it could be the type of problem that you know for sure you're going to benefit from doing more of. Either you have no idea how to follow the answer and explanation, so therefore you definitely need to focus on that type of problem, or you totally followed it, but you've decided that for you, you will definitely benefit from seeing more like it. So you walk through a problem like this and you're trying to find the distance from K to M through that box, and when you look at the explanation you go, oh, I get it. A squared plus B squared equals C squared, and A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So once I get this side, I can do it again and I can find this length. You may say, I totally get it, but I definitely benefit from seeing more like it. That's really important. If I'm looking at an nth term question and after reviewing it I go, number 12 of 17, I definitely need some more help on this, I can simply go to number 12 of 17 and click add to my organizer and bang, it's organized. That's a big deal. Add to my organizer. Bang, it's organized. This circle diameters question, if you know that you need help with it, no reason not to add it to your organizer. Now look, circles, radius/diameter. When you add it to your organizer, it's good to know, again, when you add it to your organizer, that it's put into your organizer in order of how frequently it appears on every test. This category is right here. And these are the questions in that category. There are no hard questions of that type in the entire book, but here are all the easy and medium questions. And you know on your priority list, you have some priorities before it, but you know that you're definitely going to focus on this topic long before you focus on any of the rest of these topics. The goal is to populate your organizer as much as humanly possible. If you start out with only 4 topics in your math organizer, well, this is your number 1 priority and this is your number 2 priority. But if you end up adding 15 more topics, it may be that your current number 2 priority turns into your number 7 priority, and that's a big deal. So the more you populate your study list, the more score change you get for doing the top categories in your list. That's a big, big deal. If you have a busy life and you want to prep on your own time and you want to make sure that what you do in the time you spend is the one thing that will change your score the most, the quickest, you want to populate every inch of this study list so that way you know the top 5 categories are what will change your score the most, the quickest. I hope you enjoyed this. I had a little fun showing you.